Hey homies, I got something I want to talk to you about and also ask you about. First off, this is gonna sound crazy, but if you've been with my channel for a while, you know that that's nothing new. But if you are new, sheesh buddy. Yeah, don't hold what you're about to hear against me. Many of you know that I was dabbling in that remote viewing stuff for a long time, and I had that terrifying and life-changing experience at the climax of it all. I was laying there fully awake, and it had probably been about 45 minutes of me trying to see something non-human. And I got a couple of flashes of things that you can kind of like choose to zoom in on or focus or hone in on when you're so-called remote viewing. And I saw something that looked humanoid but scaly, lizard-like, and I didn't want to tussle with that. I didn't even want to look at that. And so I kept kind of skimming or surfing or whatever you want to call it, browsing. And then I saw a thing like in the desert, like a disc with something standing up, maybe behind it or next to it, looking at me. And it was white with really big black eyes. And the scene kind of moved past that, and then things got next level. All of a sudden, it was like something opened up like a little porthole right in front of me. There was this room with black and white checkered floorboards, or a floor with alternating color patterns. There was something in the middle of the room, maybe a table, maybe a work surface, or maybe some kind of structure like a cube or something. Standing, from my perspective, to the right of it was this white, non-human humanoid, a gray, basically. And it was staring at me, and it was cold, and I could not discern its intentions or motives. And it came right up next to me, its forehead so close to mine that even though this is a image or a vision, I felt my forehead tingling. And it reached up with what would have been its left hand, but from my perspective was its right hand, and it did something around my forehead. And then it lowered its hand, and it backed off, and the rest of the room came into view. And so did this thing. It was what you would call a gray, and it was all too real. And it had cloven hooves. It had legs that looked like horse legs, goat legs. I saw so much detail on this thing. There was no way my mind was generating that on its own. But whatever. I know there's people that are gonna say, well, this sounds different than anything I've experienced, so it must be a dream. It must fit into this box or that box. Well, it doesn't, and it angers me how humans do that, but it is just human nature, so whatever, I get it. In the back of the room, I thought there was like a window, but it might have been a screen or even just an opening. There was what I thought initially to be 3 men standing strangely close to each other. The tallest one was in the center, and then on either side of him were 2 others, and they all wore a dark hat and dark clothes. I couldn't make out their facial features, but I could make out a light, white-looking skin tone, basically. But they did not move, they did not react. They looked like men in black. When I first made a video about this and first covered this, as some of the more scrutinizing viewers out there might have noticed, when I first described those figures behind the gray thing, I'd said that I saw maybe 2 or 3 men in black looking things. And the reason I did that was because at the time, I was a little embarrassed to say it looked like 3 men standing unusually close to each other, that it looked like this. I felt weird about it. And so I obscured it a little bit, and I fudged it a little bit on purpose. Not to deceive you, but just whatever. I thought you guys would think that was like too cartoonish or something, even though by no means am I in doubt about the validity or the authenticity of this experience. Well, after that event, when I started to dwell on it and take it all in, revisit it over and over and think of the implications, I realized I was in trouble, right? And I reached out and I reached out and I reached out, and then somebody said, call this priest. And you guys know I'm not a fan of any organized religion. And at the time, I wasn't even a believer. I didn't believe in Jesus. I didn't really believe in God, though I felt like he existed. But I went to see this priest because I knew I was desperate. And good came of it, right? But this priest had, laid out his framework, and he wasn't saying that this was 100% guaranteed. He said he was going off the reservation with this, but that he would, be using his own experience and ideas a bit. He made that clear. But he had talked about how these things have minds that can generate things that our minds cannot, and they can present it to you. And it did make sense. It wasn't like a completely off-the-wall concept. It was something I had been wondering about, but just hadn't put into words or expressed in that way before. Well, recently, that experience has been popping up again in my mind, and it's been, I don't know, it's been absorbing my focus. I've prayed multiple times asking God to give me some clarity about what exactly that was, what was going on. I mean, that thing I saw, that gray thing, after that thing had gotten out of my face, backed up, it turned its attention away from me. It looked to its right, which from my perspective it turned to its left, kind of towards the direction of that thing that was sitting in the middle of the room. As soon as it wasn't looking directly at me and focusing on me with those disturbingly large black eyes, it was like I could read its mind, right? But it wasn't like true mind reading. It's not like movies and whatever, it's something else. And this thing definitely was evil, or whatever was going on was not pleasant or good or wholesome. There were layers to that, white onion, and the first layer was dark, the second layer was darker, and the third layer was abyssal. These things hate us. This thing hates us, and it's capable and smart enough to know that we can recognize that, and its hatred for us is so deep, and it looks at us with such revulsion and disrespect that it can't even be arsed to hide it, and it knows that we are seeing it. And all the while, that thing in the back of the room just stood there, or at least it stood there when I kind of zoomed in and was trying to look at it, but when I was done doing that, being unable to make out really any features of the Men in Black looking thing, I didn't see it again because I turned my attention to the white thing. So for all I know, that thing could have been there the whole time, or it could have walked away. I honestly don't know. Anyway, like I've said, I've been praying for clarity about what that event was. I've been reading Ezekiel recently, and I came across the verses about how these men were ordered to go around the city and put marks on the foreheads of some who were to be spared, but the rest who didn't receive this mark, things weren't going to go good for them. And then if you're familiar with Revelation and Mark of the Beast, in the right hand or in the forehead. What is it about this concept of marking? And that's been one of the things that's been nagging at me lately. What the hell did that thing do when it came up and reached right where my forehead would have been? What did it do? Did it tag me? Did it mark me for some future event? And if so, what are the implications of that? It's bothering me. I've been making all these videos and talking about three-headed deities, right? Disguises for things like cherubim, heavenly entities, or formerly heavenly entities that are multi-headed. And I've been harping on Serapis and things like that. Serapis with the man-like figure, the humanoid, the old guy with the beard, and then next to him, a three-headed little pet. And I was talking about how, is this all just a disguise for a four-headed being or this and that? But I've really only started to appreciate now that the Men in Black looking thing that I saw in the back room, it wasn't three men-like figures standing strangely close to each other. There was an odd symmetry to the whole thing. The head in the center was the tallest, right? And the two heads on either side, though they were seemingly looking in my direction, were a little bit shorter. I have seen that same characteristic in artistic and ancient representations of multi-headed beings. I definitely don't think I was supposed to have been doing what I was doing, right? I know it was wrong. I will continue to ask forgiveness for what I did, for engaging in the occult like that with remote viewing. I definitely saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And I'm glad that, as bad as that event was, it served to put me on the path of accepting Jesus and accepting the Lord, but I don't know for sure that I'm saved, and I know that there's a lot of strong statements that could be made about that, but honestly, I've prayed and prayed and prayed on salvation, and the answer I got was, I won't abandon you, but I need you now. And though I can tell you that the big guy is definitely working on me, I don't know that I've lived up to that bargain. And that aside, what the hell did that thing do when it reached towards my forehead? What rules specifically did I violate by doing that? By choosing to see something that I wasn't supposed to see? The thing that mainly led me to putting this all together just now was that recently my buddy Stranger Than Fiction and a mutual buddy of ours, a guy named Alec, and I were all talking. And those two had been talking to each other before I joined the conversation, and I saw that they were presenting different viewpoints about scriptural topics. And I thought, well, okay, Alec's a solid guy. Stranger Than Fiction's a solid guy. We're not all gonna agree on everything. But maybe if the three of us set aside petty differences and buckle down and hit the book again, maybe some truths that we had previously not seen would jump out at us. And I started thinking, well, what could I do to facilitate such a thing? And I got the idea to maybe try to do a infographic, a diagram. Well, you know how the story that we're existing in, doesn't exist like on a straight, linear path, but it's more of like a circle or ripples in a pond. The end is very much like the beginning. I mean, for instance, the return of the days of Noah, so to speak, right? And this manifests in a number of ways. Well, I came up with the idea to draw something resembling like a wave, and then a lull, and then a bigger iteration of that first wave, right? So if you look at the little wave on the left side, it's the first part, the first iteration of the story. You know, everything ranging from creation to the fall, to the tempting of Adam and Eve, to the rise of so-called gods, the fallen beings being worshipped by man, of the birth of Christ, all of that. The second wave on the right is the aspect of the story that we're heading into, right? The future, or partially the present and then the future. And my thinking was that maybe an accurate and clear interpretation of the past iteration of the story could serve to help one understand coming aspects of the story. And not only am I fairly weak in my New Testament knowledge, I'm really weak in my Old Testament knowledge. I mean, I wrote all of this stuff off as nonsense until very recently. However, I did start, plotting some things in the first iteration, and then juxtaposing that with things that I believe will happen or are likely to happen based off my interpretation and biblical framework. And I started drawing parallels. Well, if you looked at the world through a biblical framework, but maybe a little too simply, you might think that the bad guys out there literally still just look like cherubim and seraphim and whatever angelic heavenly beings look like, right? And maybe some of them do. But how could you rectify that if you were aware of the existence of things that were evil and that were definitely not just extraterrestrial, that look like Hollywood Greys? Well, it's like, okay, we know these things were down here at one point, and we know that they were essentially worshipped out in the open, in their presumably original form, or similar to their original form. Whatever, they had wings and multiple heads and all this stuff. Well, in the Old Testament, and then up to, during, and after the time that Jesus was born, crucified, and resurrected, the systematic destruction of the system of control that these fallen beings had set up took place. And then the mystery schools were formed. They went underground. Well, while I was trying to draw parallels, something jumped out to me. Okay, these things weren't supposed to come down here, right? Presumably, but they did. Let's call that the fall, not to be confused with anything else like the falling away or the fall of man. Well, we have another instance of such an event in the first half of the 20th century. You had World War II, and then, immediately after, the ushering in of the UFO age, of the UFO era. Maybe World War II really did just occur as a result of human designs. Maybe. But if there's a struggle, a conflict in the heavens, then I guarantee that there are going to be iterations of it here in the human world. We struggle not against flesh and blood or whatever, right? But against principalities and other such things that I can't recall at the moment. Think of the human world like a patchwork of little fiefdoms and domains that are under control of these two opposing forces and their command structures. Do you think the fallen angels and the like were happy to give up their position being worshipped as gods by man when God came in and laid the law down upon them? Heck no. But okay, so in the beginning they were in heaven and they weren't supposed to come down here, but they did, the fall. And then sometime around or during or just before or after World War II, you have, once again, the arrival of things that were not supposed to be here. Whatever it was that happened, maybe just some kind of upset in heaven, or that these things that had been cast out of their bodies or restrained somewhere, maybe they devised a way to escape, or they once again repeated their rebellious ways. Well, now it wasn't winged beings that were described in Scripture that showed up. It was things that are pale and gray and other things, probably things that look very much like humans as well. I suspect, anyway. and I start to think about this, and I mentioned earlier that I've been praying for clarity about what it was that occurred when I had that vision, that experience, that weird, disturbing, terrifying experience. Well, damn, homies, I've been over here talking about Serapis and things similar to him, these three-headed beings next to a humanoid figure, right? I've been talking about Marduk, or Marduk, like I did in my last video, which I hope you've seen. And I also dived into all that stuff about how the New Age and how beliefs in ETs and mainstream promotion of this disclosure concept were all connected to satanic ideologies, right? And all of this happened for a reason. What did I mention the creator doing in my last two videos? Authenticating things, right? Authenticating his message? Well, there's an aspect of authentication with all of this story, with what I now know and hopefully can articulate and share with you. When angels came out of heaven, when heavenly beings rebelled and came here, they were worshipped by man. If you look up cults today, you'll find no shortage of these things known as UFO cults. Well, if truth is singular, and truth is singular, if there really is a way, then everything else that attempts to profess that it's the true ideology is a cult. It doesn't matter whether or not it's a cult of Serapis in 300 BC or a UFO cult in 2021. They ain't the right thing, right? What I'm getting at is that the cult from 4,000 years ago, from 2,000 years ago, and the cult from 5 years ago, and from right now, they all worship the same type of beings. The form might vary, but it's the same type of beings. This whole time I've been talking about Serapis and three-headed beings next to a man-like figure as a potentially four-headed being that's just, I don't know, disguising itself or doing something. No, maybe there are actually three-headed beings. That thing I saw an anthropomorphic thing, a gray, definitely not a man, but vaguely man-like, and in the background was something with three heads. Instead of looking like a wise old man with a big beard, and then some kind of ferocious three-headed animalistic beast, the form that they're in now is that there's a gray and three men in black. But it's telling that that same dynamic exists, a three-headed thing with a bipedal or anthropomorphic figure. That is the exact same thing. The only thing that has changed is the form and time. I know that there's going to be people who don't believe me, and they're going to think I've just really gone off the rails with this. If you've never encountered something out of the ordinary, you really have no context for interpreting this. You might think like, well, he doesn't sound like he's lying to me, but it's so unusual that it can't possibly be true. No, you must have been dreaming. I wasn't dreaming. Well, maybe it's a daydream. No, it's not a daydream. Well, you don't know. Maybe you created it in your own mind. Yeah, sure, whatever. But I said that there was authentication here. I did not start looking into Serapis and these triple deities, with the conscious intention of linking it to what I believed at the time to be three men and that gray thing. You might remember that when I explained all of this in the You Touched the Sun video, I had said that I had been attempting to remote view a human-alien interaction. I didn't mean that I was looking for one myself to engage in, but I wanted to see something non-human working with humans here on this planet. But, full disclosure, prior to doing this, I had heard people say that while remote viewing, when you remote view a non-human, it's aware of your presence. So, knowing this risk, I still decided to try to remote view something non-human. I still figured that even if it saw me, or that something was aware of me, I wouldn't necessarily be in any real danger. But check it out, anyone with even the slightest bit of knowledge regarding demonology knows that a knowing invitation extended to these things can come with great consequences, can blow up in your face. So I knew there was a risk that whatever it was I was going to see might see me. But I was so confident and big-brained and sure of myself that I said screw it. What did I do? I extended just the type of invitation that these nightmares were looking for. And so I tried to remote view a human-alien interaction. And therefore, when I saw that three-headed man-in-black looking thing in the background, I thought it was maybe three men. And so it actually caused me to interpret one of the layers coming off of that gray thing in a distorted way. You see, its first layer was that it was frustrated with my presence, right? The second layer, though, was like a despair and resentment for its lot in life, for what it was doing. And I thought it was upset and mad and sad and angry and despairing that it had to work with humans. But no, it wasn't in a lab somewhere designing something for Lockheed. It wasn't in the desert doing something in some base. I actually think that second layer, that despair and resentment and madness and all that stuff, I actually think that was because these things know what's going to happen to them. They know how the game ends. And that third layer, man, it was grim. But yeah, I didn't think when I saw all of this that I was seeing a three-headed being and a Serapis-like figure. I didn't think that. By coincidence, you could say, I started looking into these triple deities months after this, after I'd become a believer in all of that. And lo and behold, it comes full circle. I know that there will even be believers who think this is a bit much. And honestly, I can't blame people for thinking that, because that's what I would think if someone told me this crap. Seriously. But for those of you with eyes to see and ears to hear, there's some serious implications for all of this, but I don't want to start making grand statements. But this is an indication of the repetition of the days of Noah. If you're totally not into any of this, if you are still not brought into the fold and don't seem like you're going to be, if you're still an unbeliever, you might not know what I'm talking about with this, but if you're a believer, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. There's something going on where people are being brought into the fold and meeting each other, not by happenstance. A lot of the people I know, like Jason Hammond, Stranger Than Fiction, Alec, various Christians that I can trust and talk to in times of need, or when I have questions, or when we just need to share. We were all brought together for a reason. And I know, and this is awesome, that a number of you are actually brand new, which is great. I'm so glad for you. That's awesome. But I know you guys are now going to start seeing this. You're going to know what I'm talking about. And you can tell this isn't all coincidence, can't you? If you're an unbeliever, you're going to say, oh, you're just reading too much into coincidence and this. No, man. I'm telling you. You know how Masons have gay little secret handshakes and stuff like that to sniff each other's butts out in public so they can be like, you're a Mason, me too, woo. They're copying what it is that we are tapping into when we meet each other. It is so weird how when one believer meets another and they're on the same level, there is an instant connection and an instant tuning of the minds. And I don't know, it's unlike anything else. Well, you're just talking about the togetherness of a cult. No, I'm not. And there are times that you guys will feel God working in your life. There are times that happens to me. That doesn't mean we can always detect what God's up to, but it's whatever. It's awesome, and it's unfreaking deniable once you see it. And speaking of undeniable when you see it, that's how it is with that gray thing for me. I never thought I'd be telling strangers and family members that, hey, I met a real demon. I may have met something that's actually a level above just your average demon. Something that looks just like a gray alien, but that is not. That sounds like some crazy made-up nonsense, I get it. But you should see the glazed-over look that some people get when I tell them this stuff in real life. I don't know, it's just weird. I mean, I guess they're doing me a favor by not telling me what they really think, but I want people to tell me what they really think. Maybe it's just that they couldn't care less. I actually only recently realized something, and I mean, it's obvious in hindsight. It's gonna sound kind of stupid, but, up till now, when I've tried to tell people about the gospel, not the alien chud thing, and they reject it or it doesn't seem to click, I would start to get frustrated with them, mad at them, right? Imagine this, if somebody came up to you in the right moment and they told you about God or Jesus, and your heart actually opened up a little bit, how awesome that end result can be, right? Imagine if somebody came up to you in what they thought was the right moment and told you about this stuff, and nothing clicked in your heart. That is actually really, really sad. That is really tragic. This is weird to say, but we should feel for the people who are gonna hate us, right? I mean, it's what we're told to do, but I just never really thought about it before. It's I want to get mad at people who reject the truth, and I want to get mad at people who just don't ever really seem to give a flip or get even the slightest sense of urgency in any of this stuff. They just kind of regard it as another lunch conversation. It's no different than talking about your favorite TV show. But no, that's not what we're supposed to do. And that is a wild concept. The extreme of that is that when people who reject this stuff so much are literally, like, killing us, we should forgive them. Anyway, I've talked way too long. Please let me know what you think that thing was doing when it was near my forehead, though. I'm not looking for just random conjecture. I'm looking for solid discernment or good arguments, that sort of thing. Helpful things, meaningful things, not just, oh, I think it was trying to do this. Let's refrain from that kind of thing there, homies. Alright, well, I'm a chud. I managed to not poop myself today. See you guys later. Till next time.